Amy never saw them coming. One moment she was guiding her horse along the trail, the next she felt the sharp pull of a rope around her arms. Her horse whinnied and kicked, but the men were ready. They worked like predators, circling their prey. Rough hands yanked her down, sending her crashing into the dirt. Dust filled her lungs as she struggled to breathe, panic flashing in her chest. Her heart pounded louder than the thundering hooves. She fought, twisting, kicking, refusing to go down without a fight. But against 3 grown men, her strength was nothing. One held her wrists behind her back. Another grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to the ground. The third pulled her horse away, leaving her cut off from the only chance she had to escape. The air smelled of leather, sweat, and dust. Amy clenched her teeth, refusing to cry out. She knew who was behind this. Nathan. His name burned in her mind like a warning bell. For weeks, he had been circling the edges of her life, an enemy with old grudges, a man who wanted control. And now, his men had her. Fear pressed against her ribs, but deeper inside, another fire began to grow. She wasn't just a helpless victim. She was Amy Fleming. She had faced broken horses, wild storms, and the kind of grief that threatened to tear a person in two. This was different, yes, more dangerous. But she had survived before, and she would survive again. The men tied her hands with thick rope, tightening until the fibers cut into her skin. Every tug sent a sting up her arms, but she didn't let them see her flinch. She lifted her chin, staring at them through the darkness. Her silence unsettled them. She could tell by the way one man avoided her gaze. They forced her to walk, pushing her toward a waiting wagon hidden among the trees. The night was alive with crickets, the wind shifting through the branches, but Amy felt none of it. All she could hear was her own voice in her head. Don't give up. Don't let them win. The journey was rough, her boots scraping against stones and roots. Each stumble earned her a shove, but she kept moving. Every step she took, she tried to memorize the turn of the path, the shape of the trees, the smell of the river nearby. If she got free, she would need every detail. Escape meant paying attention, even when fear begged her to shut down. Dada as the wagon creaked forward, carrying her deeper into the woods, Amy's thoughts shifted. She thought of the ranch, of her family, of the horses that depended on her. The men might think they had captured her body, but her spirit was not so easily bound. Somewhere, somehow, she would find a way to turn this around. The night swallowed them whole, and the trail behind faded. Amy knew she had just entered the fight of her life. The wagon jolted forward, its wooden wheels creaking over the uneven forest path. Amy's arms throbbed where the ropes dug into her skin, but she sat stiff, refusing to slump in defeat. Each bounce of the wagon reminded her of just how far she was being dragged away from safety. The air grew colder the deeper they went, the moonlight breaking through the trees in pale, broken shards. Shadows seemed alive, stretching across her face like long fingers of warning. The men guarding her said little at first, their silence almost as threatening as their presence. She studied them carefully, noting everything. One had a limp, favoring his left leg whenever the wagon stopped. Another kept adjusting the knife at his belt, as though he needed the comfort of its presence. The third, the one who had pulled her from her horse, had a cruel smirk that hadn't left his face since they caught her. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed seeing her powerless. Finally, the silence broke. You thought you could ride out here alone? The smirking man sneered, his voice low and rough like gravel. Nathan said it wouldn't take much to catch you. Guess he was right. Amy kept her eyes fixed on the trees, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The less she gave them, the less power they had. But inside, her mind was racing. If Nathan's men were delivering her, it meant she'd see him soon. And that thought made her chest tighten. The man with the limp spoke next, his tone less mocking but just as sharp. Don't try anything stupid. These ropes are tight for a reason. You're valuable. And Nathan doesn't want you hurt. Not yet. Not yet? Amy repeated in her thoughts, the words echoing like a cold warning. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself not to let their threats take root. But a sliver of doubt crept in. What did Nathan really want? Was this just revenge, or something darker? The wagon finally slowed, grinding to a stop in a small clearing. The men climbed down first, pulling her roughly onto the dirt. The clearing was quiet to quiet. No birds, no insects, just the whisper of wind in the trees. A campfire had been built, its flames crackling low, sending sparks into the night air. And then she saw him. Nathan stepped from the shadows, his figure tall and commanding. He wasn't dressed like a rancher tonight. His coat was darker, heavier, and his eyes carried the kind of edge Amy hadn't seen before. He looked at her like a hunter admiring the catch of the day. "Well," Nathan said, his voice calm, smooth, almost mocking. "Amy Fleming, right where I wanted you." Amy's jaw tightened. She wanted to speak, to curse him, to demand answers, but she forced herself to hold back. Nathan thrived on control, and if she spoke too soon, she'd be giving him what he wanted. Nathan walked slowly around her, studying her like she was some wild horse he planned to break. "You've been a problem for me for far too long. Always in the way, always trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. But here," he gestured around the clearing at his men, "here, you don't get to decide. You listen, you obey." Amy finally lifted her eyes to his, her voice steady despite the fear burning inside. "You'll never control me, Nathan. You know that." For a moment, silence hung between them, the fire crackling like a drumbeat. Nathan smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was cold, sharp, and laced with cruelty. "We'll see," he said softly. The men shoved her toward a fallen log near the fire and forced her to sit. Nathan crouched down, his eyes level with hers. "I don't need your body broken, Amy. I need your spirit bent. And believe me, I have ways." Amy refused to look away. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to fight, to run, but she held still, meeting his stare. Inside, her thoughts raced. If she was going to survive this, she needed to stay sharp, to keep her mind as strong as steel. The night stretched on, each passing second heavy with unspoken threats. Nathan's men shifted, uneasily, watching her, waiting for her to crack. But Amy's silence became her weapon. For every glare, every shove, every cruel word, she gave nothing back. Yet deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Nathan wasn't finished. He wouldn't rest until he had stripped her of every ounce of hope. And that was the war Amy had to win, not just with ropes and guards, but with her spirit. The firelight flickered across her face, casting her in shadow and flame. She whispered to herself, so softly only she could hear, "I will not break." And Nathan's smile faltered, just for a second. The night deepened, the fire burning low as Nathan's men settled into uneasy silence. Their laughter had died out, leaving only the crackle of flames and the restless shuffle of boots in the dirt. Amy sat on the log where they had forced her, her hands still bound tightly behind her back, the ropes biting deeper every time she shifted. Her wrists were raw, but she didn't care. Pain was temporary. Freedom mattered more. She lowered her gaze, pretending to slump in defeat. To anyone watching, she looked like a broken prisoner, head bowed, shoulders drooping. But her mind was alive, racing, sharper than ever. Every sound, every movement around the fire became a clue. The man with the limp favored his right side so heavily that when he leaned on the log, he winced. The smirker, the one who had yanked her from her horse, kept his knife on the left side of his belt, loose in its sheath. And the third, the quiet one, was fighting sleep. His chin dipped, his eyelids heavy. Amy knew chances like this were rare. If she played weak long enough, they would let their guard slip. And if they slipped, she would run from across the fire. Nathan's eyes never left her. He sat with a calm stillness that made her skin crawl. His posture was relaxed, but Amy could sense the calculation behind it. He was waiting to see if she broke, waiting for the moment she begged. She would never give him that. Instead, she shifted, her hands slowly, twisting her wrists against the rope, searching for any give. The fibers burned her skin, but she welcomed it. The sting meant progress. She moved in tiny motions, careful not to draw attention. Every time a log popped in the fire, she used a sound to mask her effort. Slowly, patiently, she tested the knots. Nathan tilted his head, smirking faintly. "You're quiet, Amy. That worries me more than your protests." "Quiet means planning," Amy didn't answer. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with silent defiance. The smirker leaned in, his voice low, mocking. Maybe we should gag her. She's got that look. Nathan shook his head. No, let her keep her voice. It'll make breaking her that much sweeter. Their words only fueled her resolve. Amy pressed harder against the ropes until one wrist began to slip, the fibers loosening with every heartbeat. The firelight cast long shadows across the clearing, and Amy used them to her advantage, angling her body just enough to shield her movements. Then came her moment. The quiet guard's head dropped completely, his snores soft but steady. The smirker had gone to sharpen his knife, his focus on the blade. The limping man had wandered toward the horses, muttering to himself. Amy's pulse quickened. She pulled harder, ignoring the pain until one hand came free. Her skin was raw, her palm bleeding, but freedom surged through her veins. Carefully, she kept the other rope in place to look bound. She waited, timing her breath, timing her chance. When the smirker bent low, distracted by the shine of steel on his knife, Amy struck. She sprang forward, shoving him hard with her shoulder. The man toppled back, the knife flying from his hand into the dirt in an instant. Amy was on her feet, tearing the last of the rope from her wrists. The firelight blurred as she sprinted toward the trees, the cool night air slicing across her face. Branches whipped against her arms, her boots pounding the earth. Every muscle in her body screamed for speed. Shouts erupted behind her. She's loose! Stop her! The limp man cursed, struggling to chase. The smirker scrambled after her, rage twisting his voice. And behind them all, Nathan's voice rang out like thunder. Bring her back alive. Amy didn't look back. She knew the forest better than they did. She remembered the river she had smelled earlier, the shift of the wind in the branches. If she could reach it, maybe the current could hide her tracks. Her lungs burned, but she pushed harder. Her family flashed in her mind: Jack, Lou, Lindy, every face reminding her what was at stake. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for them. But the forest was unforgiving. Roots clawed at her feet, and one caught her boot, sending her tumbling hard into the dirt. Pain shot through her shoulder as she hit the ground. She scrambled up, heart pounding, but the voices were closer now. Over here. One of the men shouted. Panic surged, but Amy swallowed it down. She forced herself to breathe steady, to think. The river was close. She could hear it now, the faint rush of water in the distance. She staggered forward, every step a battle, but every step bringing her closer to hope. The night was alive with chaos, men crashing through brush, horses snorting in the distance, Nathan barking orders. Amy's chest heaved, her body screaming for rest, but her spirit blazed. She would not be dragged back. Not tonight. She broke through the trees, and there it was, the river, silver under the moonlight, wild and fast. Without hesitation, Amy plunged into the icy current. The water wrapped around her like chains, cold and fierce, but she kicked hard, fighting to let it carry her away from the shouts on the shore. The last thing she heard before the water swallowed the sound was Nathan's furious roar. Don't let her escape. Amy vanished into the current, her fate hanging by a thread of water and willpower. The river was merciless. The current dragged Amy under, pulling her through icy darkness. Water filled her ears, her chest aching as she fought to stay above the surface. She clawed at the waves, gasping for breath whenever her face broke free. The cold cut into her bones, but she forced herself forward, letting the current carry her away from Nathan's men. Behind her, shouts echoed along the bank. Torchlight flickered through the trees, men stumbling and cursing as they tried to follow. Nathan's voice rose above them all, furious and commanding. Find her. Do not let her vanish. Amy pushed harder, every kick of her legs burning with exhaustion. The river spun her around sharp bends, branches whipping against her arms as the water hurled her downstream. Finally, her hand caught on a low-hanging root near the edge. With a desperate cry, she pulled herself out of the current and collapsed onto the muddy bank. Her body shook violently, her clothes soaked, but her spirit blazed with relief. She had escaped for now. She pressed her forehead to the cold earth, whispering to herself, Keep going, Amy. Don't stop now. But the forest around her was not silent. A twig snapped. A low whistle carried through the air. She froze. Amy turned her head slowly, her breath catching in her throat. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Not one of Nathan's bumbling men. Someone calmer, quieter. His presence was colder, sharper like the strike of a blade. His eyes glowed in the firelight of a distant torch. I was wondering how far you'd make it, the man said softly, almost with admiration. Nathan will be pleased. Amy's stomach sank. This wasn't escape. This was another trap. Before she could run, before she could even gather her strength, the man lifted a whistle to his lips. A shrill note pierced the night, answered almost instantly by crashing footsteps in the distance. The rest of Nathan's men were coming. Amy staggered backward, her body trembling, but the river was behind her and the forest ahead was closing in. The man smiled faintly, stepping closer. You're not just Nathan's problem anymore, he said. You're mine. The torches closed in, surrounding her once more. Amy's heart hammered against her ribs. She had broken free, fought the river, risked everything, but the game was only beginning. The night swallowed her cry as the screen faded to black. The forest closed around Amy like a tightening fist. Torches flared as Nathan's men burst through the trees, their shadows twisting against the trunks. The mysterious figure didn't flinch when they arrived. Instead, he gave a single nod, a silent command. In moments, Amy's arms were seized, her body dragged from the mud. The ropes returned, rough and unforgiving, binding her wrists until the skin burned raw. Nathan appeared soon after, his coat brushing against the leaves as he stepped into the firelight. His eyes locked on Amy, and for the first time, she saw not just anger but triumph. You thought you could outsmart me? Nathan's voice was sharp, cutting through the night. Do you have any idea what you've done, Amy? You've proven me right. You don't know when to quit. Amy stood as tall as she could despite her trembling legs, meeting his glare. I'll never give you what you want, Nathan smirked, but his jaw tightened at her defiance. He gestured toward the silent stranger, the one who had betrayed her. Fleeting hope of escape. Then perhaps you'll learn from him. Meet Calder. He doesn't fail, and from this moment on, he's in charge of you. Calder stepped closer, his presence colder than Nathan's fury. He studied Amy without a word, his eyes narrowing as though calculating every weakness she had. Unlike Nathan's men, Calder didn't need to shout or shove. His silence carried weight, the kind that made the forest itself feel smaller. Amy's chest tightened. This was no longer just about surviving ropes and guards. This was about outlasting a mind that studied her like prey. They marched her deeper, into the woods, to a camp hidden between jagged rocks and twisted pines. A crude shelter stood there, lit by lanterns that glowed like watchful eyes. Chains hung from a post, iron cold and heavy, waiting for her. Her wrists were locked in place, the metal biting into her skin. Exhaustion washed over her, but she refused to drop her head. She forced herself to look past the firelight to find any path, any detail that might later become her way out. Nathan leaned close, his voice low, almost whispering. Every horse can be broken, Amy. Even you. And when you break, I'll be there to watch. Amy's lips curled into a faint, defiant smile. You'll be waiting a long time. Nathan's expression hardened, but Calder's face flickered with something unreadable, respect, perhaps, or simply calculation. Either way, Amy felt it. The battle had changed. She wasn't just a captive anymore. She was the heart of a storm that was far from over. The flames snapped high, throwing sparks into the dark. And Amy, chained and weary, whispered inside her heart, this fight isn't finished. Not even close. The fire burned low, its glow flickering against the jagged rocks that framed Nathan's hidden camp. Amy sat chained to the post, her wrists aching beneath the iron cuffs. The cold seeped into her bones, but she refused to shiver. She refused to show weakness. Every breath she took was measured, steady, as if she could will her spirit to shine. Brighter than the flames, Nathan had retreated into his tent, satisfied for the moment that his prize wasn't going anywhere. But Calder lingered. He sat across from her, silent, sharpening a blade that caught the firelight with each stroke. His eyes never left her, Not even when the knife hissed against the stone at last. He spoke, his voice calm even. "You're strong." Most would have begged by now. Amy's gaze hardened. Begging never saved anyone. Calder tilted his head slightly, studying her as though she were a puzzle. "Strength is admirable, but strength can be broken. Nathan believes he can crush you with fear. I think fear is too simple. People break themselves when they lose hope." Amy swallowed, her throat dry, but she forced her voice steady. "Then, you don't know me. Hope is the one thing I'll never give up." For the first time, Calder's expression shifted just slightly. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Not quite respect, not quite annoyance. It was the look of a man who had seen too many captives fold, and perhaps wondered if Amy truly was different. "You talk like someone who's never been pushed past the edge," Calder said softly. Amy leaned forward as far as the chains allowed. "Or maybe I've already been there, and came back stronger." The silence that followed was thick, pressing against the night air. Calder's knife slowed, then stopped altogether. For a heartbeat, the crackle of the fire was the only sound between them. Finally, Calder slid the blade back into its sheath. "We'll see," he said, his voice unreadable. He rose and walked away, leaving Amy alone in the firelight. Her chest ached with exhaustion, her wrists raw from the chains, but she lifted her chin higher. She had seen something in Calder's eyes, doubt. And doubt was a seed she could use. As the camp settled into an easy quiet, Amy closed her eyes, whispering to herself,